Nervous Optimizers. This is JJ Riscas. I am the host of Optimizing Me, the podcast where we invite top performers in different areas of human development, business, thought leadership, etc. The goal of these interviews is to get to know about these people, understanding what is it that makes them click in their minds, and also learning their tricks, their tactics, and also part of their history so that we can accelerate, optimize our own personal development. In this case, our guest today is the brilliant mind behind the Theradelic Approach, a transformative framework that seamlessly integrates psychedelics with psychotherapy and other modalities in a versatile, flexible, and highly effective way. Beyond being the author and creator of this approach, she's also a well-trained therapist across multiple modalities and also a talented artist. When I first met her and her husband, their presence left a lasting impression of awe and inspiration. Over the past few months, actually, their work has significantly influenced my own work and my personal growth. And her impact on leaders striving to reconnect with nature is simply profound. I'm thrilled to dive into this conversation, exploring the diverse modalities that she champions and hopefully sparking curiosity among all of you, like she did with me. Without further ado, let's welcome Sunny Strasburg. Hi, Sunny. How are you doing?
Hi, JJ. I really loved that intro. Personalized intro was lovely. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And it is because this is exactly what just happened right after the Bowery. For example, I have even here the Kindle version of your book that I was devouring, and it was so inspiring watching all the interviews that you have had. So I know that we have a lot to cover, but we're going to try to be concise
Yeah.
and also extract as much as we can from both of this our ends conversation. So let's start with who's Sonny Strasburg and what is the Theradelic Approach?
Wow. Who's Sunny Strasburg? I don't know. It depends on who you ask, I guess.
Yeah. Or when,
Um,
right?
I'm right, exactly a process, I guess. When I really pulled the lens back on my life, I've had many lifetimes. I'm kind of a cat in that way. Many chapters. I was originally an artist and trained in art. I worked in video games and tech for years and really didn't feel fulfilled in the way I'm an extrovert and I really like connecting with people and always really interested in psychology. And so I got trained in archetypal psychology, Jungian psychology at Pacifica Graduate Institute. And I thought I was going to be an art therapist, but my first internship was so exciting to be with people, to provide therapy for people. And through that journey of becoming a therapist, it quickly became obvious to me that I needed advanced training in trauma treatment and trauma treatments that work. I quickly understood that talking about trauma does not heal trauma. So, and I was working with populations that had drug and alcohol addiction, and we weren't talking about drugs. We were talking about the trauma that took them to that place, and that was really interesting to me. Thinking about what underlies our behavior and the things that we do. So subsequently, I was trained in EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, great trauma intervention, and internal family systems IFS. All the while I'm having this new career in therapy, even back when I was an artist, I was a psychonaut. I always enjoyed psychedelics. I went to Latin America many times to do plant medicine retreats. And I knew the power. I knew the power, but I just never thought we'd be able to use them in the United States. Never thought therapists would be able to use them. And, as soon as I could, I got trained in every modality I could. I'm trained in psilocybin and MDMA and ketamine, and sat with my teacher with ayahuasca for years and years, and have been weaving this into my practice. And over the years, I've working with Dick Schwartz, the founder of IFS, I've come in contact with a lot of leaders, and I saw, JJ, for years, I felt like I was just cleaning up trauma, like I was an emotional janitor to trauma. And I started thinking, wonder if instead of going one by one, I went to the top levels of influence in our culture and really help these people unburden their trauma so they weren't creating a culture that was traumatizing for people.
Mm.
And that was the start of working with leaders, is really looking at our society and how socially isolating it is, how it's perpetuating loneliness and anxiety and trauma. So if I could work with powerful people that were influencing all of us and helping them be more self-led, more compassionate, more connected, what would happen? And so this has been the next, version of my life right now, is working with leaders doing psychedelic assisted psychotherapy with things like internal family systems and EMDR and archetypal psychology to really help them lead with compassion, with real confidence instead of fear and reactivity.
Mm. Sonny, this is fantastic because,
Yeah.
as you
And then I can
mentioned,
talk to you about,
right? Go ahead.
oh, sorry. You asked me about Theradelic Approach, which I can tell you
Yeah,
if, with another question,
let's
but
put a pin
that's
there because we're gonna go there. There is something interesting in your story because you had this kind of profound experiences since you were very young with art, and also, as you mentioned, being a psychonaut yourself. What was the moment that really led you into now start something that, as you mentioned, the word is weaving these modalities? What happened in your mind? Do you remember the moment that it happened, or emerged organically? How was that?
I mean, of course, everything emerges organically, but it's interesting, JJ, and I'm sure you probably relate to this, and maybe the listeners. Sometimes your life seems like disparate and all like, oh, why did I do that and that? And then all of a sudden, it all comes together and makes perfect sense. Like, I thought, why did I work in video games? That was like such a waste of time. I should have been a therapist earlier. And now I work with people in tech and I know how to have these conversations about technology and how it impacts us psychologically. So there were moments, epiphanies, I think, in my own journey work. We have to do our own work, and my own journey work has really enlightened me about my dharma in this life. Why did I have these experiences? Why do I have this mind and access to things? And, you know, how can I put this all together to be in service to my highest potential in this lifetime? And that wove together just in the last probably 10 years became increasingly clear to me.
Mm, you nailed it. I relate to you because coming as well from technology, having put myself through different non-related, as would seem, modalities or frameworks, now my mind is starting to finally like weave them, and I don't know how it's evolving, but it seems to be flourishing, right? So in this case, let's talk about now the Theradelic approach, because this is every time that I think about the Theradelic approach, is like multi-dimensional area, or framework that is versatile, as I mentioned, but at the same time so effective. What is it, and what are the components of the Theradelic approach?
Thank you. So one of these epiphany moments that you asked me about was, because I was really in the psychedelic scene early as it was coming above board, I was a trainer. I started training other clinicians pretty early in when we were using ketamine, like 2018, 2019. And I was seeing every training program I attended and that I was teaching for other people was preparation, trip sitting, integration. And it left so much open where people didn't feel like they had the skills that they needed to really do good work. And so I thought I was using in my own practice, because I was always already trained in all of these different modalities. I was weaving these into my sessions and seeing amazing results. So I thought, okay, it's kind of like that Reese's peanut butter cup moment of, chocolate and peanut butter together. Oh, that totally makes sense, right? So pretty early on, I was doing EMDR and IFS with psychedelics, and I've trained thousands of people in these methods, to do, EMDR has this technique called the float back method. It's incredible. And doing that before doing the medicine session to really do some trauma mapping is super important, right? So that's a great technique for that time. And that helps facilitators know what to do during preparation. After we emerge from our psychedelic experience, our brains have released a ton of BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor. Researchers like Gould Dolan look at critical learning windows. It opens up critical learning windows where our brains are really malleable and we can learn new things. And I was experiencing this anecdotally. I was calling it the golden hour for years. Like there's a golden hour where people emerge out and they can make amazing changes. So what if I combine EMDR phase 4 through 8? What if I combine internal family systems and really work with the parts when the brain is malleable and flexible? And I saw that we were really anchoring results.
Mm.
It was like doing 20 regular therapy sessions in one session when I combined that. And so all of that kind of work and doing the work itself, kind of like Malcolm Gladwell talks about the 10,000 hours, like putting in the
Mhm.
hours of working with clients, and teaching other people and really trying to get clinicians the best tools that they could have. All of that amalgamated into the Theradelic approach and my
Mm.
attempt to provide a guide for people entering the space to know what to do when and how to do as little harm as possible too. I mean, we really need a lot of safety guardrails for these things. And
Mhm.
so it's a way of teaching almost like a qualitative method into a quantitative method of do this then so that you have some support. That said, it's really open-ended. You can be very creative
Mm.
with the Theradelic approach, but it's an overarching template to help guide people that's a little bit more in depth than preparation, trip sitting, and integration.
Yeah, and I loved by reading also your work how thorough you are in the prep of the therapist or facilitator themselves, right? Because they need to be in integrity with their own parts, and also the prep with the client in this case. And I love the approach that you have, that it is, this is not a quick fix. Many people think that psychedelics is a quick fix, but many times that causes more damage, right? So what are some of the misconceptions that people have around psychedelic therapy at the beginning, and how is the Theradelic approach addressing those ones and actually creating, as you mentioned, lasting change for good?
I love this question. It's a great question. Carl Jung said we can only take our clients as far as we've gone ourselves. And I think that's the case if you're a licensed therapist or if you're a facilitator, doing other work, anything. It comes back to doing our own work. And I don't mean just doing psychedelics. I think that therapists, facilitators all need to have a lot of psychedelic experience under our belts because you develop a trust with the medicine that comes through in the work that you do.
Mm.
It's the best co-therapist you could ever wish for if you know how to use it and how to honor it and work with it. And we need to do our own work therapeutically. It's so important that we're tracking things like countertransference. This is a Freudian or
Mhm.
Jungian term where or you could say in IFS, we're projecting our own parts, our own issues onto other people, right? And this happens all the time. I mean, I still do it even though I have a lot of awareness. So it's so important that we're aware of that in real time as we're working with someone. So we're
Mm.
constantly giving the power back to our client, and we're constantly being aware of our own internal system and what's coming up so that we can work with that so it doesn't impede the process and the progress of our client's awakening. Right? Self-awareness is so important, and it's really a hard commodity to come by in the psychedelic space because there's so much interest right now and people are rushing in because it's exciting and it's kind of hot right now, and people are not really taking the time to do
Mm.
really proper self work before going in. um, and when we talk about on the client side the misconception, you touched on that. In the psychedelic industry, we call this the Michael Pollan effect. People will read the
Mm.
Michael Pollan book, take from that, oh, you take psilocybin once and you're done. And I never have to, and it's going to cure me.
Mm.
All the time I'm getting inundated with people saying, this is my last hope, or I want to be better at being a boss at my job. I'll just take psilocybin and it'll solve everything. No, it doesn't work that way. This is very much a verb, not a noun. It's very much a process, right? And so I think that's the biggest misconception people have, is that they'll be cured in one session, and that's not the case. I don't care what medicine it is. It's just not the case.
Hmm. And in this scenario as well, something that struck me very much was how you call it, you're midwifing the experience with the client, right? Because what I liked a lot about the approach, the Theradelic approach, is that you mentioned it has a structure, but it is flexible enough so that both the methodologies and the artistic or creative parts get together there. And what kind of in the first place resistance, but on the flip side, what kind of curiosity have you experienced from other therapists, especially those who are so attached to a dogma? It's like, this is what I've been trained, this is what I've been doing for years, whether it's pure psychotherapy or like pure MDR, like, and the guy is like, no, this is my thing, right? But sometimes it gets boxed. So I would like to know, what was your experience with evangelizing the like approach?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? Because, these are parts of us that get really attached to things, and it's our ego. And it's a really interesting thing to work with psychedelics, and there's so much of the session is quiet. You're not talking, you're not being this big expert for this hapless victim, right? That you're bestowing all this wisdom on. And a lot of therapists really get into that power game of that, right? This is about, as you brought up, midwifing, something that's moving through us. You're creating a space and facilitating that. You're holding up a lantern for someone to go into their underworld or overworld. But this isn't about us, the facilitator or the therapist, right? It's not about us. And so, actually, and to your point, your question about resistance that I've gotten from other therapists, I actually have not. And I think the reason why I get that more from medical doctors that come to me, that it seems like they're more rigid about being really into the pharmaceutical instead of the therapy. The MDs that I've trained, I get more resistance. But I think what's happening, JJ, is that mental health is so terrible. The drugs that we've been using are so terrible and ineffective that we don't get results. And people go into this field usually because we're compassionate people that want to help, and just slogging away with trauma clients that are really suffering and not making much headway. You see something that works better, faster, more efficiently. And most therapists are really excited about that hope. And so I've actually found people, I have more kind of metering expectations over enthusiasm and issues with that than trying to get people to buy into psychedelic therapy as the new frontier. So, I have a lot of therapists that are like a little bit too gung-ho and not slowing down enough to realize the power of these medicines. I mean, these medicines are incredibly powerful, and with more power comes more responsibility. So we need to know what we're doing, right? We need to be very skillful with that. And so that's more of the thing that I run into. I mean, therapists by and large are pretty great people. Like they feel like they want to give back. That's kind of the archetype of the healer, right?
And so it's interesting because in the book you talked about the concept of the hope merchant. It sounds that you're the hope merchant for the therapist world as well. So can you explain a little bit, what is a hope merchant?
I love that. So hope merchant is a concept in internal family systems, IFS. And it's an interesting one, and one that was difficult for me, because one of the presuppositions of being a good psychotherapist is kind of that Freudian mirror, not disclosing anything about yourself. You're just kind of talking about the client all the time, and you're not making false promises. That's just drilled into us in our training. And in IFS, there's this moment that you become a hope merchant, where you say, I really know this stuff works. I know that you're safe in this space. I trust this medicine. And so the hope merchant aspect is really important, because you don't want to give people false hope, but you also want to point to what's possible on the other side of trauma. There's post-traumatic growth, there's resiliency. There is going to be a time where we can unburden your terrified exiles or your managers that are, making you work all the time. And we can get to that other point where you're at peace. And I think that's really important. It's like that thing I said about holding up the lantern. You're holding up the lantern for what's possible.
You're bringing something interesting, which is we started now getting a little deeper into what are the elements of the Theradelic approach. And obviously, asking you that question will lead us into at least other 5 episodes. I'm not going to go too deep into that. But I would like to ask you, what are the elements And it would be, my engineering mind is thinking, what are the elements and the proportions of those elements that make the Theradelic approach, right? So we're talking a little bit about EMDR. We're talking about IFS. So for people that are not aware of that, let's put just short descriptions. I know that those are huge bodies of work, so I think Richard Schwartz will listen to this podcast. He's going to say, "Man, you cannot just simplify something like this." But just to give people a little bit of context and curiosity, what are those elements that, as I mentioned, become the body that
Yeah,
you call
you're a
Theradelic
great
Approach?
yeah, you're a great host because you're very aware of making sure everyone knows what's happening. I appreciate the question.
Thank you.
Um, so EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's not just eye movement, it can be bilateral eye movement where the therapist is tracking your eyes. This is the phase 4 of EMDR. It has 8 phases. Or bilateral sounds or tapping. Okay. And the idea, and there's a lot of research on this, and they're not quite sure why. They think it's related to REM sleep because our eyes do that in REM sleep. But the process of taking someone through EMDR helps them bring up old traumatic memories, metabolize them, and then reintegrate them into the memory system without the trauma triggers attached. So the definition of trauma by all different modalities is trauma is something that happened in the past that your mind and body react like it's happening right now. And there are all kinds of, it's not just big T trauma like being in a tornado or sexual assault. It can be, having a chronically disappointed father that thinks that you're never good enough and always criticizing you, right? That's like a small T trauma that is
Yeah.
alive in your body and your psyche now. Right. So EMDR addresses that. IFS addresses that too, but in a different way. We look at the psyche as a multiplicity of subpersonalities called parts. The parts break down into different categories. We have protector parts, and those kind of protect the system from the exiles. The exiles are very young, fragile parts that hold trauma, hold early, difficult memories. Okay. And they're always trying to be known, but the protectors keep them kind of buried underground. The protectors can be managers, which are pro-social, so proactive and trying to do things like be perfect and work all the time and make enough money so that you can, make sure everybody knows that you're successful, or tries to control other people. Or the protectors can be, so those are managers, or protectors can be firefighters. And those are extreme parts that want to just take you away from pain. And so those are disruptive. Those are reactive parts. Those are rageful parts, parts that are addicted to drugs and working all the time and food. And in extreme ways, firefighters can be suicidal. That's like the most extreme version of a firefighter.
Yeah.
But when you look at all the parts and what they really want is to help you. So even the suicidal firefighter wants to take you out of pain.
Yeah.
So we all have different managers and firefighters and exiles that are unique to each of us. And so IFS is the process of going through all those, helping them unburden from their rigid roles, their extreme roles, and get more connected to what's called self with a capital S. Self energy is the substrate of all that we are. When our parts are out of the way, we're in pure self energy, compassionate, calm, confident, connected, courageous, creative. It's the 8 C's. And so our goal as therapists is to really help our clients unburden. So all of their parts are connected to that self energy, and self is like the conductor of the orchestra. And I've worked with thousands of people, and I've never met a human that does not have self energy, no matter how extreme the roles have become. And this really helps me with the hope merchant part because I'm very confident that it works really well.
Yeah.
And you can imagine that with psychedelics, when you pair IFS and EMDR psychedelics, what happens is psychedelics can help soften those protectors, give us access to exiles, more fragile parts of the psyche, and psychedelics can bring us into self energy, right? At when we're in that expansive, connected to everything, infinitely compassionate with psychedelic experiences, that's basically removing all the parts to get us to pure self energy. And so it's interesting how psychedelics, like I initiated Dick Schwartz into the whole psychedelic world with his own experiences. He came and trained in a cohort with us, and he was like, "Oh, we do really well with IFS without psychedelics. We don't need psychedelics." And then as soon as he saw how powerful ketamine helped people get into self energy, how fast people could move through their whatever they were processing, he was a total believer. He was so blown away by that week together, just watching one after one, person by person, just process through their trauma. So yeah.
Wow, in that regard, so we talked about EMDR, we talked about IFS, we talked about the connection or how psychedelics are working when IFS, and also we talked about trauma-informed care in this case. Now, what about the other two elements that I do believe that are very important, but not very well touched unless someone is reading your book and reading more of your content, but it is the artistic part and also the Jungian psychology or depth psychology. How do those other elements are part of the approach?
Thank you. Yeah, that's so great and thorough. Um, so archetypal psychology, and depth psychology, Jung, the work of Jung, is it's so I think of it like the mother of everything. It's like we are meaning making creatures, we're storytelling creatures, right? It's not what happened to us, but the meaning that we put to what happened to us. Something that's really, really powerful is helping people understand we're all on the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell, Jungian, talked about the hero's journey or the heroine's journey. And so weaving that in through the Theradelic approach at different moments is as kind of like a umbrella too of thinking about, okay, the psychedelic world, the dream world is archetypal, right?
Mm,
Inviting, like pairing IFS, like why did this part bring this archetype into my journey? What's that process? It's a
mm,
really interesting way to work that for whatever reason our psyche doesn't tell us literal hard things when we're in dreams or psychedelic journeys. Usually, sometimes it does, but it usually isn't like call your mother at 4 o'clock on Tuesday because you haven't been connecting with your mom. It's like weaves in like there, and then you're walking through the forest, and then there's like some popcorn that you find on there, and it just seems like weird, like why is it showing me this? But if you really work with the parts, they bring us symbolic content. I think it's because it invites us to engage and be creative with it as a process, and that deepens our understanding. So then when you see, oh, a bear to me means like a mama bear. That's why that
mm,
part showed me that. It's like my mom was always just like such a mama bear with me and took good care of me, and she really like wants to protect me, and that's why she's always asked me why I'm not married yet. And right. So you can really engage with that content through the parts. So that's how the archetypal psychology weaves into the Theradelic approach in kind of a
mm,
general way. And then art, I think, is very similar to the way that archetypal psychology works. For example, in holotropic breathwork, breathwork, you're very familiar with breathwork. In the traditional mode that Stan Groff taught,
mm,
they would give people a paper with a circle on it to draw a mandala before you speak to anyone, right? There's about your journey. And this is wonderful because you're not having to light up the Broca's area of your brain, language. You don't have to light up the frontal lobes. You're in this expressive space of creating, and that allows the ineffable material, the archetypal material, to come through your journey without having to collapse it into a story and words. So I think art's really important as part of thinking about psychedelics and therapy, in that you're activating different parts of your brain to hold on to the journeys and translate the journeys. Engaging with a piece of art, like you can look at, you can't quite see it, but
mhm.
this painting
Yeah.
behind me is one that my husband and I did, a big abstract painting. And that work, you could bring 20 different people to look at that and 20 different ideas about what that art means.
Mm,
Right. So it's a way of poetically, mythopoetically engaging with material that leaves it open-ended. And if the therapist is good, we can track those parts in the other person and bring curiosity and creativity to the session. And it can give us so much material,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and when I was in the middle of the book and we talked about the concept of the golden hour, first thing that came to my mind is my experiences in holotropic breathwork. As soon as we finished, we go into the mandala space, like no talking. That is the offload time, as I call it, right? And offload not in terms of words, but in terms of, in this case, a painting or an artistic painting. Something that you just also brought to my mind after, for example, the breathwork sessions that I lead, I also tell people, do not, if there are no words, there is no need to force the psyche to get into the language world, but instead I invite them to sketch, uh, to even move the body, to express somatically. And when I was reading the Theradelic Approach, I said, "Oh, this is so nice. I love how you ask people to actually
Mhm.
recall something that is visual or a sensation or I think something auditory. You're using some modalities from the nervous system there. Is that right?"
Mhm. Yes, totally. And people experience things so differently too. Like it's not a one
Mm-hmm.
size fits all. About 20, for example, they've actually looked at the reason why certain people have really resplendent psychedelic visions, like hallucinations, like the visuals,
Yep.
is that their 5-HT2A receptors in their brains are kind of double stacked. And so
I
that
see.
leads to more florid vision. So it can be a biological thing. About 20% of people don't have psychedelic visuals at all. They have somatic experiences, right? And so we really need to meet the client where they are and, and engage with those different ways of experiencing the world. Somatic feeling, I have a lot of clients, it's just purely somatic.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's interesting too, like with ayahuasca, I've had so many different experiences. Some are extremely gorgeous visions, some are, scary visions. Sometimes I have like shaking in my body and I can feel the medicine going through my body and like cleaning everything out. Sometimes I just kind of lay there and it just feels like empty and I'm just kind of in a torpor where I'm
Mm-hmm.
not thinking about anything. And all of that is good. All of this is a process of welcoming me to become curious about what that content means. And this kind of
Mm.
points back to this thing of like, it's not a one, it's a relationship that you develop with the medicine that helps us increasingly awaken to ourselves and what's happening in our own system, right?
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, it's and my mind is starting to connect more and more how, as I mentioned, flexible and at the same time structured the approach that you've developed is because I know that. Oh, let's talk about a little bit of what is Panther. I think that's going to be very helpful also for people. What is the Panther acronym stand for?
Mm. Sure. Um, so, I was thinking about how to frame the Theradelic approach is kind of this big, the whole first part of the book is all orienting toward this, my philosophical view of what's happening, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the Theradelic approach is the big thing. The Panther method is the actual technical protocol for how to go through a psychedelic
Yeah.
assisted psychotherapy treatment protocol with our clients. So Panther is an acronym, and I love it because Panther is definitely one of my totems that shows up all the time in my journeys. And Panther is stands for P is preparation, A is attunement, N is needs of the protectors, so an IFS idea. T is trauma mapping, so when I talked about doing the float back technique with EMDR, trauma mapping. H is holding space. How do we hold space during the journey? E is empathy and engagement. How can we as therapists regulate our own nervous systems and stay engaged with our client throughout? And then R is resolution and integration. So this is that golden hour. How do we help our clients resolve all the content that came up? How can we help them integrate and metabolize everything that happened? And then each of those stages in the Panther method break down into here's some suggestions about what you can do in this stage, this phase of the treatment
Stages.
protocol.
Wow. I never,
Yeah.
I was thinking about this, but it never came fully to my mind that actually the panther is the archetype that shows up in your case. What does it represent to you, Sonny?
I've had him, it's a he, help me many, many
Oh,
times in my journeys when I'm really struggling. It's kind of like and I love that the archetype of the panther because dogs, when they hunt, they're jumping around and slash, they're not careful and they're just kind of all over the place. Cats are very smart in how they kind of hang back, watch the situation, conserve energy, very strategic, and when they hunt or when they take action, right? And so I started thinking about that with in my journeys, my own journeys about my own life. Like, how can I conserve energy? How can I be very careful about what I'm doing? And then when I started thinking about how that applies to being a therapist, it's like it's very helpful to have good rapport with a client and be hanging back and calm and know
Mm.
when to engage, when to speak, when to offer suggestions judiciously, right? And I just love that judicious, careful energy that kind of feline energy brings. And so for me, it just made total sense as I was thinking about the Theradelic approach and that protocol. Like, oh, of course, this fits so beautifully because as therapists, you want to be totally present and caring and attuned, but also careful about not being overly involved in your client's experience, right?
Mhm.
Judicious in our interventions.
Hmm. Let me ask a few questions around how do you actually operate optimally? Because my thinking is that now you have your own rhythm that I may have changed over the last few years, not only in terms of how you engage with the modalities, but how does Sunny perform optimally in a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis? It could be a little big of a question, but I'm curious about your optimal performance.
I love that. Well, first, I think self-care, really making sure that I'm taking care of myself. I'm of the belief that taking care of our mind, spirit, and body is important. So, I exercise, I weightlift, I spend a lot of time in nature. I'm really into mountain biking and hiking and trail running. And so I think that is something that really helps me. I have ADHD, so that helps me orient, like burning off extra energy, helps me sit in a chair and be calm for my clients. I think it's important to do my own work, and I can really feel when I haven't had time to
Mm.
do my own journey work, I'm just not as good. I'm not as sharp. And so reconnecting with that is really important. Breath work, I sauna. I do a lot of sauna. I meditate. I have a practice every day that I have an altar that I've set up, and I do a whole magic and meditation practice that I do every day. I take it on the road. I have a little altar, portable altar. That feels really important to me. And then, something that I think is really essential is having good intimate relationships. So I
Mm.
really curate my circle around me and my intimate relationships, and
Mm.
help, and I consult. I mean, I consult with each other with our clients, and having that as a resource is really important too. So I think all
Mm.
of that stuff is I take like 30 different supplements a day. Things like that is really becomes really important when I mean, I'm sure you know this, JJ, and
Yeah.
when you're doing high impact work, it's really, you really have to show up with all of you, right?
Yeah, yeah, and you're nailing it because obviously the amount of stress that your nervous system is enduring, not only in the one-on-one, in the group experiences and the organization, in some cases that you need to
Mhm.
perform, etc., it's taxing on you. And if I can only imagine how you have developed over the last few years this protocol that you're telling me right now, right? It is your version of what works really
Mhm.
for you. Hmm.
Yes,
And
definitely.
so. Sunny,
Yeah,
something that I also wanted,
critical.
I was very curious about this is we talked a little bit about also your mentors. You talked about Dick Schwartz. What other mentors have you that come to your mind over the last few decades or years have impacted more the work?
Yeah, I love this question because we don't do this alone, right? We
Mm.
learn and we're guided. And probably the biggest impact in my whole life has been having mentors, for sure. Having
Mm.
people that can really guide. Um, I think if you looked at my astrological chart, it would probably have mentors all over it because I've been blessed with amazing humans in my life, so many teachers. When I went to Pacifica, um, Yeah, James Hollis was there. Marianne Woodman was
Wow.
teaching. I mean, that was phenomenal. Christine Downing. I mean, amazing, amazing people. James Hillman, did I say James Hillman was there? So that was
Wow.
incredible. Then, yeah, totally amazing. And then, working with Bessel van der Kolk and learning from him early was impactful for me. And then I ended up doing trainings with Bessel and working together. Um, and knowing the early Sasha I've met, they weren't specifically mentors, but they knew of, but they were so inspiring to me, and I got to know them a little
Shulgins.
bit. Rick Doblin and Sasha, yeah, in the early 2000s was
Wow.
incredible. And then my teacher from Peru, who's Quechua, Christina has
Mm.
been such an incredible teacher for me, and probably most inspiring because she's so humble and has been doing the work quietly decades. No flashiness, no trying to develop an IP, none of that. She's like completely dedicated in this most humble way to doing the work, right? Um, I aspire to be like her. And then of course Dick Schwartz has been incredible, a wonderful mentor for me. And now I'm working a lot with Daniel Schmachtenberger's organization, Civilization Research Institute. They're doing like AI risk work, and he's really a mentor. He and Zach Stein have become
Mhm.
very inspirational for me, and so now working with them more extensively has been really beautiful. And I'm always open to learning more and love collaborating with others. It's so inspiring, and so many more teachers that I could name, but those are a few of the highlights.
It's funny because I stumbled upon Daniel Schmachtenberger a few weeks ago, right before our breathwork session. He was just visiting Austin. I was like, Daniel Schmachtenberger, because he's been such an impactful person over the last few years for me as well. So, highly,
Oh,
highly.
he was actually there.
He was actually here, yeah.
He
He
was
was act.
oh,
Yeah, I told him, hey, I'm
amazing.
having a breathwork session. If
Yeah,
you want to join, just be my guest. And he says, I have to go take a
that's
flight, otherwise I
great.
will
Yeah,
do it. Yeah, that was funny. That was super funny. I mean, in
anything
Austin,
that
we
can
stumbled
help.
upon everyone.
Anything
Yeah.
that I love that. Yeah, anyone who can help soothe Daniel Schmachtenberger's nervous system with all the work that he's doing on the meta crisis that's great. So thank you for doing that for him.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I actually
Let's
did a
go into the
project with
last.
them working with.
With what?
Oh, sorry. I was going to add that I did a non-pro. I raised money to do a project with CRI to offer their staff IFS sessions, support sessions, because they're
Wow.
working on such intense material. So it was such an honor to work with his team and help support them because they're doing such, and they're leaders in this way of, really working through all these intense things that we're dealing with right now in the world. So yeah. So I think that's a good
We could.
application of how we can help support leaders.
You're very right, and without trying to go too much into this, because as I mentioned, that will be another episode. I see you also at the same level of doing the meta work here for leaders. I call it having an impact vertically instead of scaling horizontally. I call it having an impact vertically because, as you mentioned at the beginning of the talk, by supporting the leaders, then, and this is something even in my own work, I work one-on-one with leaders, and I never know how any of our interactions are going to impact positively first themselves, maybe their families, their clients, etc. And it's 2 3 years after that when someone will tell
Yeah.
them, oh, this is how this thing impacted, and they will let me know, and it feels like, wow, it is such a profound impact that we never know that we're gonna be able to accomplish, and you're exactly doing that, so thank you so much for that. How do you think this kind of work needs to get mostly deployed now, because we're facing something that is huge in terms of humanity? So what kind
Mhm.
of next steps do you see in the work that you're doing?
Well, I want to back up a little bit and just talk about something that I think will answer the question that you kind of touched on. And thank you for your work too. It's just really important to be doing this. I think about things in terms of within, between, and beyond. So if we use IFS language, within is our internal ecosystem. Do we have secure attachment with our internal ecosystem? Are we good with our autobiography? Right? There's a lot of work to be done there. Between is how do our parts interact with our intimate people in our intimate lives and their parts, right? So our partners, our kids, our parents, our best friends. So that within is internal ecosystem, then the attachment style and the way that we relate to people between in our intimacy, and then beyond is how do we take that out into the world, right? How do we impact large organizations with the work that we've done and help make fundamental change for the better? So I'm working with people, I'm really tracking where they are on that spectrum. Are they really in their autobiography still? Are they interested in how they relate to their intimate relationships? Have they worked through all that and now they're able to see outside of themselves into the bigger world and how they can make change? And we have to meet our clients where they are. And so if they haven't done that autobiographical work, they're not going to be effective in the beyond. Right. So then we're rewinding back to do within work. Right. And so that's kind of the framework that I think about when I work with leaders or really anyone is I can't get them to think about their impact on the world and think about the meta crisis and what they're doing if they're still working on their internal ecosystem. I mean, we're seeing right now in the news so many very powerful men that are like little boys, like fighting like little boys in the schoolyard because they haven't done that autobiographical work. And so they're not even thinking about how that impacts the entire world. Right. And so these are the kinds of things that we need to help people with, meet them where they are and help them work through those layers to get them to think in this bigger way. How do I impact the world around me? How can I be a better?
Thank you so much. I know that we're getting to the end of this one. I want to be extremely respectful for your time. Where can we find more of your work, Sunny?
Thank you. Sunnystrasburg.com is my website. And then all my handles on social media are Sunny Strasburg LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist. So Sunny Strasburg LMFT. I'll be posting, I'm always posting little clips and I'm sure people will be able to find our interview there when it comes out. So that's where to find me.
Yeah, with copious
I also want to
flip
say,
notes, I
JJ,
should say. Go for it.
yeah, good. I just want to offer, I've been on a ton of podcasts and I really appreciate that the lovely research you did and the thoughtful questions. It's really a lovely interview and your clients are very lucky to have you because you're very attuned. I really appreciated your thoughtfulness.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. It means a lot. It means a lot. This is, as I mentioned in the past, I mentioned that when I'm in front of another person, I mean, the first gift that I can give is my pure presence because learning from people like you is an honor to coming from where I came. Thank you so much for that. In
No, thank you.
closing,
Thank you,
Sunny,
Jake.
what is a question that you could leave the audience with to help them see new perspectives, expand their minds? What is a question that we would like to leave them with?
Um, The question would be, with a little explanation, what part is speaking now? So whenever we're triggered, whenever something's happening for us, instead of thinking that's you, take a moment to see if you can bring some curiosity, maybe even compassion to that part and say, who is speaking now? It's a part of you that wants you to listen to them. Just separating from being blended with it can be so powerful.
Thank you so much. I'm going to just soak that question, Sunny, and I know that we're going to meet very, very soon as well. I know that. Um,
Thank
with that being said,
you.
thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. If you like this
You're welcome.
interview with Sunny Strasburg from the Theradelic Approach, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and also keep up with the upcoming episodes that we have here at Optimizing Me. Until we meet next time, keep learning, keep optimizing. See you soon, guys.